Participants in the Mahabharata war, attendees of the sacrifice of Dasaratha, father of Rama, descendants of the moon god, and simultaneously devotees of ancient hill gods, rivals of Vaishnavite Manipur, and possessors of a complex relationship with the Bengal Sultanate. This is a brief exploration of the Manikya dynasty of Tripura, which ruled the region for nearly 500 years. Their story weaves a rich tapestry of state formation, religious interactions, the pull between mountain and river valley, and global trade. I am Anirudh Kanisetti, historian and author of Lords of the Deccan. Welcome to Thinking Medieval, where every week we tell you something new about our complex, innovative past. Always feel free to check out our research and citations below, and remember that we're all figuring out how to think about our messy, bloody, dazzling history. As we saw in this video on Manipur, India's northeast, which is so often divided along ethnic lines and constrained by a colonial-era border, is in fact one of Asia's great crossroads, linked to mountain systems that form the very spine of the continent. These mountain systems, counterintuitively, acted as a trade highway. Goods and ideas circulated through them at enormous scale, connecting apparently isolated mountain strongholds to vast global networks. A striking example of this comes from cowrie shells studied by Meso-historian Joy Pachow in Flows and Frictions in Trans-Himalayan Spaces, Histories of Networking and Border Crossing. Used as petty currency for centuries, in some cases as late as the 1700s, these shells originated as far away as the Maldives and Philippines before being drawn into networks in Bengal, Arakan, and the associated mountainous regions. It was within this diverse world that the state of Tripura emerged in the 15th century. The Rajamala, a Tripuri court chronicle from that era, suggests a push and pull between the peoples of the hills and those of the Ganga-Brahmaputra delta who were part of the cultural and economic world of the Bengal Sultanate. The Sultanate underwent a brief crisis during this time when a local magnate, Raja Ganesh, became its de facto ruler before passing the throne to his son Jalaluddin Muhammad Shah, the first Bengali to rule as a Muslim sultan. After enlisting Ming Chinese diplomacy to fend off the power of Jaunpur to the west, more about this story in this video here, Jalaluddin extended Bengali power east to Arakan. It was through this that the Sultanate came into contact with the chiefs of Tripura, who were just beginning to expand from the hills to the plains. The Tripuris were either subjugated or managed to drive off the Bengalis. The sources are a little conflicting. The Rajamala claims that a Sultanate army was defeated by a Tripuri queen after feasting her warriors on buffalo and goat meat. What is clear is that by 1464, the Tripuris felt confident enough to issue their first coinage. Coins, as seen in different places and periods of South Asian history, were small, portable pieces of propaganda. The very first Tripuri coin was a close imitation of those of Sultan Jalaluddin, with elegant lion work depicting a lion. Or should I say, elegant lion work. This lion was both an Arabic motif and linked to the goddess Durga, worshipped by Sultan Jalaluddin's father Raja Ganesh. It seems that in this diverse economic world, Bengal Sultanate coinage was considered the most reliable standard of value, leading Tripuris to copy it so that their coinage could spread into the same networks. However, the king who issued this, Ratna Manikya, a Sanskritic regnal name, is also depicted by the Rajamala as having obtained his throne and the title Manikya from the Bengal Sultan, as well as an infusion of Bengali and Persian speakers for his new state. On the other side of South Asia at the same time, the first kings of Vijayanagara and the southern Deccan also claimed legitimacy as supposed wards of the Sultan of Delhi. Now, both of these were probably little more than political posturing, but they still reveal that in late medieval South Asia, Turco-Persian rulers were considered a legitimate, wealthy, and powerful source of authority. Now, Tripura had a complex relationship with the Bengal Sultanate, to be sure, but it also had a complex relationship with Hinduism. As historian Richard M. Eaton writes in The Rise of Islam and the Bengal Frontier, it was through the 1500s and the 1600s that most of the Ganga-Brahmaputra delta was finally brought under cultivation. As local pastoralists became landed peasants, they converted to Islam. But even as the agrarian and Persian frontier moved east, so too did Hinduism, or to be precise, Bengali or Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In the 1700s, for example, the Manipuri king Gharib Nawaz converted to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, as we've seen in this video. Now, the Tripura region had already interacted with the Hindu gods, especially Shiva and various goddesses, as early as the 8th century CE. This indicated by the stone carvings of Unakoti. But the nature gods of the land continued to be worshipped. When the Tripuri state was established in the 15th century, the ruling Manikya dynasty instituted a Hinduized royal cult of the nature gods, now called the 14 divinities, and identified them with mainstream deities such as Vishnu, Saraswati, and Shiva. Interestingly, they were worshipped not as anthropomorphic idols but as busts. These are relatively rare in mainland Hinduism but are common in the oldest religious traditions of the Tripura region. Now, the Rajamala claims this was an ancient practice instituted by an ancestor of the Manikyas, but this was probably fabricated in order to make a relatively new practice seem more traditional. It's also in this context that we should see its claims that Tripuri kings were descended from the moon, fought in the Mahabharata war, and witnessed the events of the Ramayana. Some have been very eager to take these claims literally to prove that India's northeast was always Hindu, but I think that's a tragic oversimplification because it doesn't do justice to the region's early born religious history. Rather, we should ask, why was it so important for Tripuris to claim that the royal line was so ancient? It was a way for them to legitimize their authority, distinguish themselves from other chiefs, and bridge the Sanskritic and local worlds, as historian Deepayan Chakraborty argues in Legitimization process in Tripuri state formation, accommodating Sanskritization and primordial culture. Nevertheless, the Hinduism of the 15th and 16th century Manikyas was very different from the religion we know today. When describing the career of Dhanya Manikya at the beginning of the 1500s, the Rajamala, in tremendously entertaining fashion, describes how unearthed dragons helped his armies scale fort walls, how fierce yoginis caused floods to wash away Bengali armies, how the king beheaded his rivals in formal audience not once but twice. Now, all of these might seem Hindu enough, but when describing the material culture of Dhanya Manikya's expanding kingdom, which included Chittagong and various hill forts of Kuki peoples, it mentions elephants' tusks, yaks, goats, gong bells, plates, jugs and spittoons made of pewter, and colorful fabrics of red, black and white, copper bangles, cedar wood, spears, swords and ponies. It also describes the sacrifice of a young Dalit man to create a horrible sound that scared off a Bengali army, and claims that the king reduced human sacrifice from dozens a year to one person every 3 years. Dhanya Manikya is also praised from the viewpoint of the Rajamala's Brahmin authors for his patronage of Brahmins and construction of temples. Now, even from this impressionistic sketch, it should be clear that in Tripura, the Sanskritic culture was a veneer over a vibrant, cosmopolitan northeastern world that we are all too eager to dismiss today as tribal or violent. Religion has always been a tremendous force when deployed by the state, and the Manikyas of Tripura, suspended between Bengal and Burma, Hinduism and nature deities, are well worth remembering for this. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Follow us everywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Anirudh and at Connected Histories, and on Twitter at Kanisetti. We'll see you next week.